and vice versa. How much discussion was there about the incoming teams in Texas and Oklahoma?
There was a good bit. Obviously, Alabama's playing Texas the second week of the season this year, and obviously Steve Sarkisian, being a former Alabama assistant coach, that's gotten a lot of play. Texas has done very well in the state of Alabama, grabbing some highly touted recruits. And, of course, there's been some transfers out of the transfer portal that was on Alabama's roster last year. So there was a lot more talk about that. But most of the people believe that Oklahoma is obviously in a much better position from a program standpoint to be competitive quicker than Texas. They do believe Sarkisian in the way that they have been recruiting, that they're going to be someone that you'll have to deal with, more so Texas A&M than the rest of the SEC. But they believe that Oklahoma will be more competitive coming into the league quicker. And listen, guys, I know you guys are in the state of Texas and you hear a lot of stuff too, but the people I talk to around the SEC, we still believe that we're about 1 year away from officially welcoming Texas and Oklahoma into the league. I know there's a lot of stuff that has to happen, all this realignment, what the Big 12 potentially could do, the grant of rights and everything that could potentially let Oklahoma and Texas out early. But the people that I talk to, they've maintained that they really do believe by next summer at this time, we'll be getting ready to welcome into the SEC, Oklahoma and Texas.
Well, which means they're going to be writing some big checks, and they have the money for the most part to be able to do that, or about to get even more to be able to write the various things from grant of rights and or the exit fees as well.
Just to be clear, do you mean as far as like playing, not this upcoming season, but playing as early as, next year after this one?
I would say 2024 is a more realistic expectation.
Yeah,
and I think we're on board with that.
And you know what? When that story broke a year ago Friday, by the way, when Brett Zerneman had that story about Texas and Oklahoma, there were thoughts, and I think Texas and Oklahoma probably hoped that the Big 12 would implode, and the next thing you know, they walk out the door because there's no fence. That obviously didn't happen. They were able to try to solidify what they were or who they were, and I was surprised it wouldn't happen by 23. But I'm the Big 12 is going to hold their ground. Texas and Oklahoma have been patient, and trying to pay out a year rather than 2 or 3. There's a huge difference, even though there's a lot of legalese that goes into the grant of rights and all that other stuff as well.
Yeah, no, there's no question about that, because listen, you guys are much closer to it from a Texas perspective right down the road, as opposed to, obviously I'm broadcasting and know a great deal of what goes on inside the Southeastern Conference, and nobody thinks that anyone is going to write a check for $80 to $100 million to leave the Big 12 early. But if things keep playing out in regards to realignment and certain things that could potentially happen with ESPN and maybe a creation of the Big 12 network, because the Longhorn Network is going away once they join the conference, and you never know when Brett Yarmark wants to sit down and talk to Texas and Oklahoma and say, you know what, guys, this is going to be a better situation for all of us, a year earlier than expected. Let's just go ahead and part ways. And I think at that point in time, Texas and Oklahoma would be in a better shape, especially Oklahoma, to write a check to go ahead and head to the SEC. But again, a year ago, like you mentioned, being there at SEC Media Days and that story coming out, and all of us were as surprised as everyone about that story. Nothing would surprise me moving forward based on everything we've seen, especially now with the Big Ten kind of rustling up everything in regards to realignment.
I kind of suspect when they have to make a 14-team schedule, that's not going to be, easy to replicate, especially given the fact that you have to do it for 2 years max and then do it again. And then you might have added some more teams subsequently and then may have to do a 16-team schedule with 4 different teams and 2 that went out. That maybe the Big 12 won't be motivated to go, all right. Let's just move on to where we're going to be.
Yeah, and listen, and it's an interesting part about the scheduling, as you talked about, because that's been a big topic of discussion in my neck of the woods, because, what are we going to do? Are we getting rid of the divisions? Are we going to go to a pod system? Now it seems like, they're going to go to 9 conference games as opposed to the 8 they currently play, which means each team's going to have 3 permanent opponents. Well, then all of a sudden, who's Texas going to have 3 permanent opponents? Who's, Oklahoma going to play all the time? And then that's going to upset everybody on the eastern side of the conference, because you got a lot of old rivalries between Auburn and Georgia, even Alabama and Auburn, and Alabama, Tennessee, and Alabama, LSU. So something's got to give in the near future. So we'll be very interesting to see how it all pans out, especially with those teams coming in, who their permanent rivals will end up being.
Pat,